What's up? Yo, yo, yo. Check, check. Toast, toast. Toast, toast. Shouts out to Rooks G for this new one. This one's called River Glider. Check out ROXG on his channel. Apple Music everywhere. She buys music. Shouts out to everybody out there. Philip Morris, Marlboro Man here. Marlboro Mediums. Red Labels. NXTs right now. What's up? Getting started here in just a second. That's our guy. That's Rooks G right there with River Glider. Hey, it's been a minute. Welcome back, everybody. We're here for everybody. We're here on the main channel. We're not in members tonight. We're for everybody. We're open to the special beings and everybody out there. Tonight, we're going to cover a fun one. We're going to talk about what I think is the perfect movie. This is The Princess Bride. It's been so long since I've been on here that if I start to freeze up or if the volume isn't right, I mean, the settings are all what they are, so have some grace and forgive me. But we're back here. It's been a minute, and that's because I've been working on the book. We'll get to the book a little bit later on. The book is now published. You can check out the link right there. But let's get into what we're talking about. We're going to talk about Dostoevsky's White Nights tonight and a little bit of Susan Sontag's Under the Sign of Saturn, and sort of contrast those and use them to inform our opinions about The Princess Bride, the Rob Reiner film from 1987. And I thought I would do this one tonight because this is a wholesome movie. We're going to do some wholesome movie posting tonight and some analysis of. We're going to skip the dark stuff in terms of the movies tonight. We're getting into spooky season here, so pretty soon we're going to be getting back into the spooky movies. And I know people enjoy that. I enjoy doing it every year. I can't believe another year has gone by. But before we get into that, we're going to get into what I think is one of the great movies of all time. Now, recently, I posted a list of the top 50 or so, like 41 to 49 or something, great movies of the 21st century. I haven't done the greatest movies of all time yet for everybody, but I put that on the community tab. So you can check that out. It's still down there. Go to the community tab and scroll down there. I think there's some familiar favorites on there. We've covered a lot of them, maybe most of them. But one movie that we haven't covered is The Princess Bride. And I thought we would do this because it ties in a lot of the themes that we've covered here in terms of movie watching. And one thing that it does have elements of The Most Dangerous Game, sort of, but it skips a lot of the Gnostic elements that we get in films, and we get into pretty much what seems like a straight up wholesome movie, adventure movie, and it has an incredible amount of depth that I think people have probably forgotten. A lot of people refer to The Princess Bride as a desert island movie because it's wholesome. You can watch it a million times over, especially if you're an 80s baby like me, born in 1980. Hey, I'm about to turn 45 next week. That's great. That's crazy. I'm almost a half a century old. How did this happen? But I remember watching this movie in 1987. I was 7 years old, and we first the teacher rolled in, and we first rolled it in on the old AV cart. You remember that when they rolled in the television and the VCR, and we watched it at school. And then I would when we would go to the movie gallery, I would demand this movie to be watched. I liked movies like this already. I think a lot of dudes probably like movies like with elements of this because it has the Man in Black, it's got the Masked Man, it's got adventure. Andre the Giant is in the movie. It's got sword fighting, swashbuckling, and there's some other elements that I'm gonna get into in terms of what makes the movie really have a sort of deceptive amount of depth to it. It is both a kind of parody of adventure movies and fairy tales, and also a kind of literary and film satire. There are elements of Douglas Fairbanks in this, and what's the fellow's name from New Zealand? Captain Blood, Errol Flynn that are mixed into this. When I was at drama school in England, we actually watched this movie and studied it in terms of the sword fighting and the stage combat techniques in the film. And it really is my thesis for the movie. If I'm going to have that for this film, my thesis for the film is it's a lot like it's pretty similar to what I was just covering in terms of Narnia, which is in the Narnia series, the Narnian series that I just did on C.S. Lewis, and that is that the movie is not an appeal to a younger audience. It's not just a movie for young people, and it's not just a movie for older people. This, again, is another work of art that is really for the child that we were, and it presents both an idealized version of love and what it means to sacrifice oneself, but also teamwork, friendship, and things that we should probably look back on and reach out to and sort of look up to in terms of our adulthood. So it's important. There's a part in the last battle, remember, that I just covered, where Aslan says about the dwarves that they are so afraid of being taken in that they refuse to be taken out. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we should hang on to some of the innocent things, especially from our youth, not in a sense where we're collecting Labubus and Funko Pops or whatever that was. That would be for my age. It would be like if you were collecting GI Joes and He-Mans or something. I don't know. Not in that sense. Not in a sort of the degraded sense. I'm talking about looking back on the innocent parts of your childhood and what you aspired to, and finding some sort of light, because it's, I would say that it's an increasingly darkened world, an increasingly dark world, but it sort of remains the same in that sense. And one thing that I've gotten really out of, not this is a words of wisdom or a life advice or something, but one thing that's been refreshing from taking a break, sort of staying tuned in, dialed in to everything in an ancillary sense, and hearing about news, from the zeitgeist, and you just got to pluck it from the airwaves and from my friends. But in terms of not being dialed into it all the time and working on creating something, is that you really get a sense of perspective. I mean, everyone knows this. This is not something new, but you get a sense of perspective about what's important in your life and what you really want to do and what you want to create. Because it turns out that if you are working hard at making something, and that would be if you're making something at work, if you work in an office, if you're creating a website, if you're starting a business, if you're writing a book, if you're acting in a play, whatever the thing is that you're making, all of your time and all of your energy goes into that in a way that actually makes the world, I think, in a number of ways, much more difficult than if you are just tuned into the news cycle all the time. And that's not to criticize that, because that's the way we sort of happen to be, dialed into the way things are all the time. But what happens is that you start to put your energy into what you really, really care about. And it actually, in a lot of ways, makes things worse in the immediate sense, because you want things to be perfect. You want the thing that you make to be perfect, whatever that happens to be. And so I think that it's important to watch movies like this and to remember who you were before all this, before you grew up, and to sort of hold on to some of those things. And this is a really great movie for doing that. I'm not saying that we should get our morals from movies. We don't. It's not. And also, when we look at art, This is all just sort of a big preface to the movie I'm about to cover. It's also important that we realize that when we're looking at works of art, whether it's films or paintings or plays or poems or novels, anything, that we are not necessarily looking for a moral or a puzzle piece like we're reading a fable. That is often a mistake, I think, when it comes to art. And I would consider this film, The Princess Bride, a magnificent work of art because not only does it appeal to our visual sense, I mean, when we look at the film, it has a kind of soft glow to it, but it also the color patterns, the shades of autumn in the film, the way that we look at landscapes, the kind of way that natural landscapes and on-set locations merge with set pieces and paintings in the background really does convey a sense of the fantastical and fantasy in our own lives in the best way. And remember that I think it's important also to remember that when we watch films, when you are viewing a film, even just for fun, it's hard not to have the critical eye and the sort of critical analysis when you're watching. And I think that's important. But you also have to, as Coleridge said, suspend your disbelief and really remember that if the content of the movie indicates the fantastical, the phantasmagorical, or something like the point of this whole movie, which is true love. True love is powerful in the film. It's the greatest storyline in terms of fiction and fantasy film that you could possibly have. I think that it's important to remember that the camera is the eye, it's the literal lens through which we see the events. And the camera work in this film is quite amazing, but all films are driven by characters. So one thing I realized watching the film, it was sort of reiterated to me in terms of the analysis of the movie and my sort of self-reflection watching it, which we all do. That's like a high term for just watching a movie and thinking about it. Is that it is that excuse me, it is that I think that movies are character driven. They are essentially what they say in Hollywood. When you hear Weinkuss in Hollywood talk about movies, it's always storytelling. They believe in storytelling. Well, it's like Jerry Bruckheimer. What we like to do is tell stories. So what I like to do is go and watch The Terminator, and I sit in the seats and I laugh, I cry, I buy my popcorn just like anybody else. And Tom Cruise is one of the greatest actors of all time. He could be put in an F1 movie. He could be put in a stock car, and he's going to win. That's the competition. That's what we want to do. Don and I really got into Hollywood. There's that Bruckheimer interview, which I love. I love rewatching. I even rewatch it now, where he is just nonstop, full throttle talking about movies. But he has a great sense of the salesman about him when he is discussing his own movies and what he thinks about movies. But there's a lot of truth in that. And I think that movies are character driven because we not only see ourselves in an archetypal sense, we find ourselves rooting for characters. We tend to think, what would we do in this situation? What wouldn't we do? And this movie is exploratory in terms of the way that actors really are allowed, they become allowed because of a story and because of an entire film production to flex their muscles in terms of pretending. Because acting is pretending. Try acting, dear boy, Laurence Olivier said. And this movie really does show that a movie does not have to be stocked with classic, big money A-list actors. It also doesn't have to be full of just theater people in movies. There's a kind of mixed bag, or like Seamus Heaney and Ted Hughes called poems, the rattle bag. There's a kind of rattle bag full of great acting in this that occurs from different places. Who would have thought that Andre the Giant would be one of the great actors, and he really is. Andre the Giant is fantastic in this movie, and I think, again, that takes the kind of suspension of disbelief. I think that the cynic would watch The Princess Bride and would say that Andre the Giant is terrible at saying lines, but that belies the fact that his character is that, and that there is a kind of wholesome innocence in terms of what his character does in the film. Because when you watch the movie, and go back and watch The Princess Bride, when you watch this movie, you will believe that this character is in the film, and that this is just like all the great films. This life existed. We get a snapshot into the world of the events of the film, and then once the camera stops rolling, they go on and live their lives. That's what the best films do. And I think that the characters in this, first of all, the kind of triplet of villains, we get false flags in this. There are terroristic operations. There's a scene of MK Ultra. There's a Trotcher scene in this. We get mistaken identity, submersion of identity in a villain character who turns out to be the good guy. We get the Man in Black, who's actually the white hat character. True love. There's the Scarlet Woman. The movie really has everything. So we're going to discuss The Princess Bride. I'm going to kind of take us through it in terms of what I think are some key points of this and what makes it really the perfect film. Then I'm going to discuss a little bit. I'm going to compare and contrast a little bit with Dostoevsky's White Nights. And his short story White Nights, and from his 1848 collection. And then I'm going to talk about Susan Sontag's Under the Sign of Saturn, if we can get to it. I think that I picked up Susan Sontag's book of essays because I was looking for the location of this quote that I got when I was an undergrad. When I was an undergrad at Queen's in Belfast, I had this professor, Michael Allen, R.I.P. Professor Michael Allen, who, I think I said this last time, I was taking a class on American poets, and I was writing an essay on the ecstatic culmination of the lyric poem, and I was talking about Theodore Rothke's Big Wind and a couple other poems, some of Sylvia Plath, and he said, go to the bookcase. Look in the middle. Look under S. Pull out that old dog-eaten tome, and go to page 79. You will see a particular word. Read the word to me. So I read the word, and the word was jouissance. Shout out to Nick Mullen who used this. And of course, this is used in Susan Sontag's book, and I finally found it in one of her collections of essays, and it's in Under the Sign of Saturn. But I was really interested in reading about Sontag's thoughts on romantic poetry, romantic art, because that ties into both Dostoevsky and Princess Bride. And that was a happy accident. I didn't mean to do that. But also mainly her essays on Hitler, she writes a lot about fascism, and then of course her big essay on Antonin Artaud. I've talked about Antonin Artaud before: Theater of Blood, Theater of Cruelty, The Theater and Its Double, and Artaud is a kind of modernist update, French update, the poet Maude on Rimbaud. So we're going to talk about that and how that indicates modernity, because we've talked a lot about modernism on this channel, especially most recently. I think the best sort of elucidation of modernism was with T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound in that book, the biography of a poem, the Wasteland book, which again, please go back and watch that stream. That's one of my favorite streams that we've done, and it was one of my favorite, most recent books that I've covered. But Susan Sontag has a lot to say about modernity, and you're not going to like a lot of it. I don't like a lot of it, but it is truthful in terms of what it indicates and what it conveys and what has come to pass. Last night on Boiler Room with Hesher and Ruckus, my good friends out there, shouts out to Boiler Room and Alternate Current Radio. Last night we were talking about some of the things in the postmodern world, like with the transitions occurring in the technocracy and transhumanism, and the way that technology is completely overtaking our lives. And my sort of one thing that I was considering while we were talking was that I think one of the big points of alienation that's occurring with people, especially in terms of hyper technology as we move towards quantum technology and AI and all this stuff, is that there is there's a sort of simplistic and easy way of falling prey to despair with this stuff, and it becomes either despair or worship of this sort of technological monolith that's looming over us. But one thing that occurred to me was that if William Caxton brought the printing press to England in 1476, and we have spell checker in the 90s, and think of the advent of the telegraph, and think of the advent of any kind of giant technological system that occurs, you know that people in history must have just been completely overwhelmed with the thing. And there was a certain segment of population that thought that it was going to be the end of the world, and then a certain segment that thought, okay, we can use this as a tool. Well, technology is a tool for us, of course. And I think that it's important. Thank you, Kristen, right there at Slow Boy. She said, and I am the 33rd thumbs up. Guess what? I was number 33 on Amazon in British and Irish poetry yesterday for my new book. So Illuminate confirmed completely. But I think it's important with this stuff to realize that at some point, all we can do is use these things as a tool for us, as a tool for ourselves, especially in the act of creating something. We have to make stuff. And that it's important not to get overwhelmed with what is truth, because there's only one truth. That's the way, the truth, and life. That's Christ. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that I think we have a long way to go with this stuff. We should naturally be skeptical and naturally be probably pretty angry about a lot of the ways that this stuff is affecting us. And I think that the alienation really occurs because in the past, take for instance the printing press. There's a great not great as in good, but a big democratization that occurs in terms of the average person having access to things that only the elites had, until they become co-opted again by this kind of elite system. And the same thing is occurring now with this stuff. And my sort of resolution with this, because we were talking about books, was that you're less and less likely to find great books in public libraries. I even thought of how most people think of the burning of the library at Alexandria, and even our views on history tend to be skewed, because it wasn't the library at Alexandria that it wasn't the library at Alexandria that was the great ancient wonder of the world. It was the lighthouse. It was the lighthouse at Alexandria, not the library. And the early Christian monks they really set a precedent for us in terms of what we should do, which is to find, save, and curate books. We should be grabbing physical media where we can, especially books. It's hard to take care of books. They're bulky. They take up a lot of room in your house. They are prey to all sorts of bookworms and critters and dust and humidity. Books can get warped very easily. And at some point in your life, there's that sort of adage about how we're here. Our children will remember us. Our grandchildren, if it's in God's providence that we have grandchildren and children, if we have grandchildren, they will certainly remember us. Our grandchildren will have a memory of us. Our great great grandchildren will remember our name, and our great 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 grandchildren won't even remember that we existed. So in a lot of people's cases, the books get disseminated and they get split up and they get passed on. But it's important that we collect books. I think that I've always tended to avoid public libraries in favor of bookstores. I like to own books and collect books and have as many books as I can. They also are great decor. They're the sign of a gentleman. They're the sign of a learned person in your house, but also because they function as a physical exterior embodiment of what you believe, what you want to do, and they are kind of an exterior encyclopedia of things that you can reference. So I think that it's important to keep those things in mind, and that everything that Susan Sontag says in her book, especially regarding Artodian modernity, tends to be very dark and decreasing this space between the artist and the viewer. And we see that more and more, and we see that embodied more and more every day in terms of how we are going to, think about sort of social philosophy now about being the hero of your own story and being your own protagonist, being your own kind of narrator, until it results in a place where people question the kind of MSM gigantor media. It tries to gaslight you and tell you, what do you mean you have a voice inside your head? What does that mean? Meanwhile, people walk around in open air insane asylums with literal voices on the outside of their head. So I think it's important to take those things with a grain of salt and to try and remain grounded and remain lucid in the midst of all this. And taking us back as a weird segue, when I hear the word segue, I think of George W. Bush riding that segue, as a weird segue back into a movie like The Princess Bride, because again, this is a movie that appeals to not only the way things were in the 80s when the movie was made, but also in terms of the sense of the innocence and lightness of childhood and who we were all children. We were all children at once, and so to sort of tap into that, who we once were, and to try and just take it easy a little bit. So The Princess Bride is a 1987 film by Rob Reiner. And Rob Reiner, people remember Rob Reiner because he played Leo's dad in The Wolf of Wall Street, where he was obsessed with that movie, The Equalizer, which is pretty funny. And aside from anything I know about Rob Reiner, Susan Sontag actually echoes this. She says that it's important to remember the art rather than the life of the artist. Oftentimes we don't know anything about the artist himself. We simply look at his art. And I actually think that's valid and important. That's been one of the guiding principles of the channel from the very beginning. But Rob Reiner has created some big Hollywood films, and usually they deal with sorts of things like When Harry Met Sally. Whenever I think of When Harry Met Sally, I have not watched the movie. I never watched it. I don't really intend to watch it, not for any sort of moral reason. I just don't. I never cared about that when I was a kid. I never cared about watching a Billy Crystal movie, and I did like Meg Ryan in Joe versus the Volcano. I thought that was cool, and she was, the kind of '80s actress. I thought she went wrong playing Pam in The Doors. That was a stretch. That was a bad casting decision. But I think of these two kind of gigantic characters that form this new archetype in Hollywood of You've Got Mail, and another movie which I haven't seen. I'm not really interested in those types of movies. But this is a romantic comedy in the vein of what I imagine those movies are about. Because I know enough about the movies, and I know the famous monologue with Billy Crystal and all that stuff. I don't, and not to say that that's, it is what it is, as my friend Maddie says. It is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. Shouts out to Maddie at Real Cooter Brown. So, this is a romantic comedy, but it's also an adventure story. It's a swashbuckling tale, and I think that the most brilliant thing about The Princess Bride, the thing that really does it, is the bookend. Do you get it? I mean, it's pretty in our face, but the movie is a book. It's actually written by William Goldman. William Goldman is one of the great screenwriters. He wrote All the President's Men, which gave me providence for my book, my next book, which will be a novel called West Hampton, subtitled All the President's Children. And I don't know when that'll come out. I'm trying to put off working on it because I'm trying not to get too obsessed with things and work all night like I've been doing. But that novel will come out, I don't know, sometime in the next year for you guys, and I think you'll like that. That'll be a work of prose. But what was I saying? Oh, he wrote All the President's Men. He wrote Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. It's an Oscar-winning screenwriter, and he ended up writing this movie, I think, and he was informed by reading to his children. So the movie gets bookended because he wrote a book, he made the movie. The movie is literally a meta reading of a book, which we go into, and we have the bookended character of Peter Falk as the granddad and Fred Savage as the grandson at the beginning, middle, and end of the film. This is probably what makes the movie great. It may seem contrived, I think, to some people watching it, but it is not. It is great. So the film begins with Fred Savage as a kid who he's 4 years older than me, but I always imagined he was about my age. When I was little, people always said that I looked like Fred Savage because I had curly hair. And they said I talked like Fred Savage because I sounded like this even when I was a kid. I had a very hoarse and raspy voice, and he kind of does in the film, even though he's sick. But anyway, even when we were watching the film when I was 7, the teacher was like, "That's you." And I was like, "That's not me. I'm the biggest, strongest boy in the world. You told me that when I helped you move the desks. Don't you remember?" And she said, "Yes." And then I said, "I have the highest grade in this class, and I'm the best reader." And she said, "That's right. That's my little reader." Or whatever. Anyway, so Fred Savage is sick. He is wearing a Chicago Bears 85 jersey. He's got a picture of the fridge in the background. Shouts out to the 85 Bears. That's your team. Speaking of, I know we're whatever about sports ball, but I am excited for the game on Sunday because it'll be my boy Trey Henderson. It'll be his first full-on professional game. He's playing the Raiders. The Raiders are my favorite team back in 1990 and 91. I fucking love Bo Jackson, dude. Hell yeah. I love Bo Jackson. I also love the Cinderella season Redskins, but that's my knowledge of especially football ends when I was about 11. But I can tell you anything from before that. Anyway. That's when I realized that sports ball was not it. Right, this stuff was all contrived. They were playing us against each other. They were trying to recruit for the military-industrial complex. I realized that when I was 11, because then Desert Storm started, and I said, "This is not it, man." So anyway, so I'm sorry. So he's wearing a Bears jersey. And he's got lots of knickknacks and accoutrements of the 80s behind him. He's got a pretty sick bedroom, actually. And he is sick. This also made me sort of ruminate on what it meant to be sick as a kid because, just like any kid, you don't want to be sick, but there's a great feeling. That's one of the great things about life is being sick as a kid and having your parents take care of you at home and you get to stay home and watch TV or whatever. In our house, you did not watch television. Some of my friends would be like, "Yeah, I watched whatever this morning before they came to school." And I'm like, "What? Who watches TV before you go to school?" I was hardly even allowed to watch it when I got home. Sometimes, I always got my homework done, did well at school, but there was only so much amount of TV that I was allowed to watch every day. We read, and I watched a lot of movies, but those were usually for weekends and stuff. But anyway. There is a great thing about being taken care of, and I think that is probably speaks to an allegorical sense of us as. Forgive me for this, but that probably speaks to in an allegorical sense to our wanting to be taken care of by God, by the Lord, because we're all. Sick. We're all sick in the fallen world in some way, and I think that we want that great hospital for the soul, and so it's refreshing to see that as a kind of hallmark or throwback to when we were kids and we lived in a time where the metaphorical was literal. Everything, our imaginative world was closely bonded to the way that we lived our literal lives. There was less of a distance between symbolism and the real. Things seemed real that were symbolic. So I always think of, whenever I think of being young, I always think of going out onto the playground for recess. And I know everybody, especially the dudes, I know you guys probably relate to this. Just if you were like me, when you went out onto the playground at recess and they said it's recess time, especially if you I went to prep school, so we got if we were good and we got another recess, which obviously is because the teacher didn't have anything to do for that day or whatever. But it's important for kids to play. I think, the closer I am to marriage now and thinking about kids, I think the more I think it's increasingly important to think about how we live in a world that's kind of flipped upside down where kids are supervised when they shouldn't be and they are unsupervised when they should be. And it should be obviously the other way around. Kids should be allowed to play and there should be an unsupervised sense of play. Like, for instance, on the playground, you learn to solve problems, you learn to sort out your own issues, you learn how to deal with society. And the times when you should be supervised are especially when you're learning to worship, when you are learning to read, when you're taking, when you're in school lessons, and those things should be supervised and guided. But imagine you're going out onto the playground and they say, it's recess time, and I would run. And I would run so fucking fast, man. I ran so fast, and I'll never forget this time. I can feel it in my bones right now. I would run out on the playground, and I remember doing this, yelling to the teacher, "Watch, I can fly," and I could fly. I remember thinking, if I just run a little faster, I could fly. And that, I think, there's a sense of being well and being taken care of, even when you're sick, that the movie really brings up all of these sort of memories and feelings. And the other thing is that the movie is not just for the kids the age of Fred Savage watching the movie, which is, by the way, forever. Because one of the great things that movies do is that they allow, the bad thing is that they allow the people in the movies to think that they're forever young. But they do allow us watching the movie to think of those things in the movie as forever young. And then, so by extension, we think of ourselves as forever young in a way. And so when we watch Fred Savage, we think of ourselves being that age, and we were that age, and we still have that somewhere inside. But we also look at the character of Peter Falk in this, who plays the grandfather. So one thing that's really great about the movie is that the mom comes in and says that that his granddad is here, and he's going to read him a story, and he's skeptical of this. He doesn't like it, just because, like most kids, he doesn't want to read and he doesn't want to hear a story. And the way that this transitions through the movie is really expertly done, because remember that one of the great scenes, this is such a small scene, but it probably is the scene that clinches the whole movie. It has nothing to do with Cary Elwes. It has nothing to do with Dread Pirate Roberts. It's got nothing to do with Humperdinck or Buttercup or Andre the Giant. It's when, in the middle of the film, they cut back to Fred Savage and Peter Falk in his bedroom, and Peter Falk is reading to his grandson, and he says, hold up, and he interrupts the story, and he says, what happens? What happens? Tell me what happens. I got to know. And Peter Falk's this is great, because this really is indicative of how we as adults want everything now. So he's a kid, and he's showing us that in our kind of infantilized world, in the way that we revert back to immaturity and emotionalism, that we want everything now. We want the answers now. And Peter Falk says to him, he says, I don't think, listen, you're a little sick. I think we need to take a break. You're getting a little too emotionally involved in the story. And then this is probably the best scene in the movie. And what Fred Savage does is he says, you know what, Granddad, I'm sorry. I'll listen to the story. So in other words, part of, and I'm not just saying this because it's not the journey, it's not the destination that matters, it's the journey. It's not that. It's that the journey and the destination both matter, but you have to allow yourself to live and to get to that place. Cutting corners and getting to the end doesn't mean anything if you haven't struggled through the narrative. And so Peter Falk, he sort of kind of harshly tells him, no, we're not going to read any more of this. I'm going to let you go to sleep because you're sick and you're acting like a child, which you are. And then from this, the kid learns a life lesson. You got to chill. You got to chill. You got to listen to your granddad when he's talking. He's there to read you a story, and this is really important. And that is a great, great scene in the movie. It doesn't give us morals, but we get a kind of morality from this scene, which is, again, indicative of our own lives in the way that it should be. So he's reading him the story at the beginning of the film, and we go into the story. We're kind of hesitant, just like Fred Savage, because, we've got this boy, and he's in love with a girl, and it seems like a love story. And notice also that it seems like it's going to be a feminine fairy tale at the beginning. And so Fred Savage healthily says, I don't want to hear it. But he's telling him about love, and this isn't just something feminine. There's a masculine aspect to this, and this is that Wesley, who is the stable boy. He's a man of few words. He's a boy of few words. He doesn't say much, but he's in love with Buttercup, and all he says is "as you wish." God, it's magical. It really is magical, and he's basically, this is a life of service. It also is a throwback to Arthurian lore, to Arthurian romances. Later on in the film, there are a couple of references basically to the Castle Dolorous and the Castle Perilous, and this is where Lancelot frees the guys from the castle, or we get Tarquin who holds people captive, and we have to sort of make our way to the true castle and past that and get to the Fisher King and find the Grail. But leading up to that, we have romances where we have a romance where we have a knight errant who is in service of a lady, and this is supposed to be, and this is a mirror of a religious quest, because ultimately the Grail is about achieving the Eucharist, about finding and taking part in the Eucharist, in the Eucharistic ritual. And so in the meantime, he's serving a lady, and this shows what knighthood is. Knighthood is both fierce, manly, masculine, but it's also gentle and kind, and it's not cruel. And so we have Wesley, who is serving Buttercup, and then eventually he goes away. He goes away he goes away just like St. Patrick does, and he is taken prisoner as a pirate, and we don't hear from him anymore until he returns as a kind of, in this, he's a kind of apostle of love rather than a literal apostle, the apostle of Ireland. And Buttercup is brokenhearted. And what's great in this is that true love really does, in the film, seem to test the bounds of reality. It encompasses both life and death, and Buttercup is a virtuous woman. She's only taken up by Humperdinck to become the princess because she is a victim of political machinations of which she is completely unaware. This turns on its head the normal fairy tale ideal of the virtuous girl who is taken from the sticks and wants to become the princess. She doesn't have any interest in becoming the princess, so it forms a kind of parody of the fairy tale story. And so she is seen by Humperdinck, who is he lords over this land, and he's going to take her as his bride because he has to have a bride from the people. Already, this is something you don't get as a child, but when you watch the movie now, you understand that this is a kind of Machiavellian machination so that he will match with the princess from the land. He'll have support from the people. Then what he intends to do is create a false flag incident where she is kidnapped by a group of mercenary assassins, and then they will either, if they kill her, then he can use it as a pretext for invading Gilder, which is another foreign territory. It's a foreign rival. And he'll get both sympathy from the people, and he'll also have a pretext for a reason for war. If she is not killed, then he can take her and he'll have her as a bride, and she'll become a kind of pawn like Eleanor of Aquitaine with Henry II. But she is all the time thinking of what happened to Wesley. And eventually she is kidnapped. She's black-bagged and kidnapped and taken on a barge, and she's about to go to a black site before she has to end up at the cliff. The cliffs. It's the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland. And this is probably my favorite scene in the movie, because this is where I can never remember the rhyme that he says, but this is it's where Vizzini, I can't remember the little guy's name, Wallace Shawn Vizzini, where he is, I never called him by his character name, I just called him Inconceivable. It's where Inconceivable is yelling at Andre the Giant. He's a kind of pseudo-Napoleonic terror who's totally Machiavellian again, and he's yelling at Andre the Giant, and of course Mandy Patinkin, who plays Inigo Montoya. And when he steps away and he says the thing about don't get near the cliffs, I mean it. And Andre the Giant says, "Does anybody want a peanut?" I realized watching the movie that this is my exact humor Benzini, thank you, Kristen. This is my exact humor. This is something I still do to this day. I love stupid rhyming with people whenever they say anything in real life, and I got it from this movie, and I did not, and I'd forgotten that I got it from this. So as he steps away, Inigo and Andre the Giant look up at, he looks up at Andre the Giant, and they are the best of friends. And this is really where the movie shines, because if movies are guided through camera work and we look through the literal lens of the camera, we're looking through the lens of the camera into the lives of people, then our next lens and our more powerful lens, the thing that we really focus on, is the character's eyes. It's stop rhyming, and I mean it. Does anybody have a peanut? Thank you, Clontarf. It's the character's eyes. And Mandy Patinkin, who by the way filmed that episode of Homeland in my parents' house. His green room. I've told you this before. When they filmed Homeland here that season, this is so wild. They needed. You remember, there's a woman in Homeland, and she's like CIA. They needed a CIA woman's home. Luminate confirm. No, they needed a CIA woman's home. So they went around the neighborhood, and they're scouting for locations. They saw my parents' house. They saw the library through the window, and they asked if they could film it there. So they filmed an episode of Homeland. It took a week. They put my parents up at a 5-star hotel in town, and one of the camera loaders was one of my friends, Elizabeth. Shouts out to Elizabeth out there. She worked on Captain Phillips and The Box and a bunch of films. She was one of the camera loaders in the kitchen. And so they transformed the house. They put it back exactly as it was. They were very good. But Mandy Patinkin was in the scene talking to the CIA woman in her library, which was my parents' library. So anyway, his green room was my parents' bedroom. And then when it was over, I was there. And when it was over, he walked out of the house. He was done with the scene. And I went, hey, Mandy, hey, like that. And I went, hey, get back here. hey. And he kept on walking and walked really fast away. But I was like, hey, I wanted to ask him questions. What was it like, man, when you were in that movie? That's a real story, by the way. That is a real story. Yes, look that up. Vizini, thank you, Kristen. Thank you for looking at that. Shouts out to Kristen right there, Slowboy Whiteboard. Please make sure that you sub to her channel also, because she is the best. She's the best fact checker for me that I know, and she's also one of the biggest supporters, and she is totally based and totally dialed in. So thank you, Kristen. I really appreciate that. Slowboy Whiteboard. So anyway, So Mandy Patinkin is great in this movie. Mandy Patinkin is what I was saying earlier about a kind of wide range of characters. He's a theatrically trained actor, and he is the absolute best in this movie. He's probably the best in the movie. The movie would not exist without him and without his singular performance. I think that this is a real ensemble. All the characters, all the actors really, really do contribute to making this what it is, including, of course, Peter Falk, and Fred Savage, being included, but really, I think it's Mandy Patinkin who is the linchpin in this whole thing. So anyway, they go to the cliffs, and they put that harness on, and he climbs right up. And of course, they've been trailed the whole time by the Dread Pirate Roberts. Dread Pirate Roberts is what's the guy's face? Silk Road. I have his biography is here. American Kingpin. What's the guy's name? Ross. Ross. So anyway, so Ross, Ross Ulbricht is chasing them up the rope, and when they get to the top, they go through the Arthurian trials, and. Thank you, Agent Zero. Hey, thank you, everybody who's here right now. Please make sure you smash that like. I haven't said that in a long time. I haven't been here for a long time. Please smash that like. If you want to support, you can support me with the links provided. Jason has put them up. You can hit me up on PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. You can also support me with the Super Chat. Ask me a question. Do whatever you're going to do. In the Super Chat there, you can also grab a membership. Man, the memberships have really sustained me. Thank you so much for the memberships, especially over the past month when I was working on the book. And speaking of which, if you want to buy the book, book. The link is right there, pinned to the top. Buy my book, Runes, on Amazon. I was number 55 today. I went down from 33, but I was behind Shakespeare. I was behind Shakespeare, Mallory, the Gawain poet, Seamus Heaney, and John Milton. So that's pretty illustrious company. So anyway, yeah, you know Fred Savage's best role, by the way, is the bit role that he does playing the like tenor sax or whatever. Is he playing a clarinet? I think he's playing a clarinet. He's playing a clarinet in the movie, the Bret Easton Ellis book, Rules of Attraction. Do you remember Rules of Attraction? Remember Fred Savage is in that movie? There's a great scene. He's watching Nosferatu on the screen. He's on he's on that dog food. He's got a cigarette in his belly button, and he's playing the saxophone. That's actually a pretty funny role. I think that's probably his best role. But Rules of Attraction with the Bret Easton Ellis dramatization of the book. Anyway. Soundtrack by Love and Rockets. Remember that? I saw that with my friend Steph in the cinema in England. All right, so they get up to the top, and now he has to go through the first trial. And the first trial is the scene that I watched in drama school to prepare for stage combat. And so what happens is this is a great scene because it really shows the true modern embodiment of the knight and the sword fight and the duel, because we have the man in black who's masked like Zorro fighting Mandy Patinkin, and they start off with a witty repartee, or as Norm Macdonald calls it, a badinage, which is a back and forth. It's a badminton term, back and forth, where both characters are in the right. Both characters, in a sense, are wrong, but both characters are in the right. There is no possible outcome that can be good from this because we like both characters. We know that this is Wesley. Dread Pirate Roberts is Wesley. We know that. We want him to win, but we also like Mandy Patinkin. And somehow they managed to have the best possible outcome of this, which is that they fight an escalating duel, and finally Dread Pirate Roberts wins the duel. He knocks him out, but it's fine, and he'll come back another day to save him, and where they will unite. But notice that one of the witty parts of the movie is, and this really is a kind of Captain Blood, Douglas Fairbanks, Errol Flynn type of sword fight, where the sword fight is both a back and forth, a badinage, a witty repartee that is reminiscent of the tennis match in Henry V that we covered between Hal, who's now Henry, and Elizabeth in France. But it is also a musical piece. This is the way that sword fighting, classical sword fighting, especially with rapier and dagger or in the finer points, this sword fight is so delicate, and it's reminiscent of a kind of back and forth waltz between two characters. It is even musical in its beats. So the characters really, there's the fantastical and a kind of parody where they do sort of a gymnastic somersault and a bunch of sort of things. Yes, you seem a fine man. I hate to kill you. You seem a fine fellow. I hate to die. Is absolute. Somebody, I don't know. Let me show that one. Thank you, Jeremy. That is completely wholesome and honorable in the situation, and the characters completely get out of this. Good movie, but pretty degen. I don't see how this movie is. Oh, you're talking about. Oh, yeah, Claude Tharp. You're talking about Rules of Attraction. No, yeah, you're right. No, you are. You are correct about that one. Yes, about that. I thought you were talking about Princess Bride for a second. No, you're definitely talking about Rules of Attraction. Yes, it is absolutely degen. It's a interesting movie, but I would recommend The Princess Bride for this one, especially tonight. So then, what's up, KF, and everybody out there in the chat? Thank you so much. So then what happens is he moves on to the second, which is the second battle, which is a battle of strength, where he fights Andre the Giant, who's throwing boulders like they're like like they're muffin tops or something. And he even says, "I don't even work out," which is very funny. Um, and he wins that one pretty quickly. Then he has to go to the Battle of Wits with Vizzeni Wallace Shawn. With Inconceivable. He has to fight against Inconceivable. And this is great because it has the great part about the poison. If you think that I've eaten the poison, so whatever. They have to, he's been poisoning himself for years, he's been baking, okay, hold on. He's been baking fried Oreos with baked with Raid for years to prepare for this battle of wits with Wallace Shawn, and he wins the battle. Then he captures the princess. She, at this point, is the Scarlet Woman. She's off for her ride, but she's both full of blood and life and love, hence the red dress, but also the target of what Humperdinck is going to use for his sacrifice. Remember that the characters are assassins, and they have been hired. This is pre-Brute Squad in the movie for a false flag incident, which is explained to us in a moment of exposition that is seamless throughout the film. It's really well done. And eventually they make their way. They're at the top of the hill, and then they fall down the hill. This is reminiscent of, this looks like the Mourne Mountains or parts of Wales, and they fall down away from the six-fingered man and Humperdinck, who are out chasing them. He is a he's a stalker. He's stalking his bride at this point, and they make their way through the fire swamp. So again, now we go into the wilderness. And we are deprived of light. And we get these human rodent creatures that search after us. And he saves his girl, and he reveals himself that he was the Dread Pirate Roberts. He is the Dread Pirate Roberts because this is a name. It's a name. It's an idea. And it's not just one person. He was taken as a slave, like Julius Caesar or St. Patrick. And eventually he makes friends with his slaver. And that is part of the sort of, I think, unintentional ritual of him becoming Dread Pirate Roberts, and it allows the former Dread Pirate Roberts to go off and retire. So again, we have a kind of good outcome for something that seems kind of bad, but this is the sort of Robert Louis Stevenson idea. I've covered Robert Louis Stevenson here, by the way. Remember that? Idea of swashbuckling and piracy. And eventually, remember that he is captured by the bad guys, and he's put through a literal mind-altering electroshock therapy where they intend to break him MK Ultra style in a dungeon. And although it is extremely wholesome, it is pretty scary in the movie. And of course, we have the Sid Gottlieb six-fingered polydactyl Aleister Crowley figure of Christopher Guest as the six-fingered man who is torturing him to death. Eventually, he escapes. He is paralyzed, and this part of the movie really becomes, in a sense, a kind of extended Christ-like allegory of a character who dies almost in every way, but then is resurrected in his lifetime. He's not fully. This isn't the. It's an allegorical extension, so we're seeing this through symbolism. He is essentially dead and broken, just like he was with Dread Pirate Roberts. He went off and he received a kind of baptism where he came back as a new person. Now he goes off into the wilderness, and eventually he dies and is reborn fully in love with Buttercup, and he eventually saves her. Inigo Montoya has his excellent his great vengeance on the character of the six-fingered man. I suggest you go back and watch just the duel that occurs between Inigo Montoya and the six-fingered man, because aside from the sort of mantra that develops where he is telling him that, you killed my father, prepare to die, this thing that he's practiced all his life. There's a great line that the six-fingered man says. He says, "Are you the little Spanish boy that I left all alone all those years ago? I think that's the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life." And he's so villainous, but he's just completely. He's completely cold, but in a warm way where we even like the bad guys in the movie because they seem like they are a parody of the normal fairy tale sequence of events. And Inigo Montoya, when just watch this scene, this is a mastery of acting. When he comes back to life and he fights him, he notice that he parries the sword thrusts, but he still gets stabbed in his shoulder blades and in his stomach, but he is parrying the sword thrust as he is parrying his comments. And eventually he gives back to the six-fingered man exactly the treatment that he was given until he finally finds vengeance. And he finds true love in the movie. His true love is that he is allowed to say to his father's killer, "I want my father back, you son of a bitch," which is again a kind of meta. It's a kind of weird meta insult at the guy who has taken away his own father. And by doing this, he is allowed to kind of find fulfillment in this sort of blood vengeance in the film. But it ends up being something that you want to happen in the movie because his whole life has been about this. And he's a kind of anti-warrior to the Dread Pirate Roberts. And the Dread Pirate Roberts, Wesley, ends up being a Christian embodiment of what we want in the film, which is to find true love, wholesome happiness. She's the princess. So at the end of the film, when he wins and the bad guy, Humperdinck, literally runs away and is treated like a child, this is both a satire. I think it's both a satire on the political machinations of the elite who send out other people lesser than them to do false flag attacks but have no dog in the fight themselves. They're completely devoid of any kind of emotion. They are complete cowards. And Wesley triumphs over this, finds his love. And by extension, if she's the princess, he ends up as a kind of prince. And he's a prince of peace symbolically in the film because they go back to the manger at the end of the film. They end up in a kind of return to Bethlehem in the film where they end up at this manger. They are now husband and wife, and they live happily ever after. And the greatest part is right after that when we get, again, a return in the bookend to Fred Savage and Peter Falk, who he's about to leave. He's about to turn off the lights. Fred Savage is about to go to sleep because he's sick. And he says to him, and the movie ends with, "As you wish." And I really do think that this movie is perfect. It's even the weird kind of drama school synthesizer score that takes place in the film conveys a sense of innocence regained when watching it. We are willing to suspend our disbelief so much because we love the characters and we find wholesome, true, almost spiritual love at the end of this film where the good guys get exactly what they deserve and the bad guys go away, they get what they deserve, and all is right in the world. And then we return to the real world of the bookended meta-narrative where the character who's the child who was sick now seems like he's been in the hospital for the soul and is well at the end of the movie. Meanwhile, his granddad goes outside. It's almost as if his granddad has transformed from Wesley into his granddad. His granddad is now his hero, and the movie ends. What a perfect movie. It's very difficult to make a movie like this. It's so fucking good. I can't recommend it enough. I think people should rewatch this movie. It really is a desert island movie. It's totally wholesome. It has all the elements of goodness, and it really is a very well-made movie. You take out one of those elements, and the whole thing would fall apart like a house of cards. It would fall apart like a house of cards. The whole movie would fall apart if you didn't have the characters you do, if you didn't have the actors you do, if you didn't have the script that you do, if you didn't have even the way that we see the characters in their eyes. Mandy Patinkin is so good in this movie. The way that his eyes change in the film according to the moods is really, really fantastic. And that kind of takes us in a a weird segue into the next thing I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover this pretty loosely. This is White Nights by Dostoevsky. A lot of people have been asking me to cover Dostoevsky. Of course, I did. The Underground Man. I did Notes from the Underground with our beautiful Tristana friend, Primal Edge Health, Tristan Haggard. That was like 3 years ago. Can you believe that? We've been doing this almost 4 years, and that was about 3.5 years ago that we did that. So if you want to see a coverage of Dostoevsky that I did, you can go to Primal Edge Health, Tristan Haggard, and watch our coverage of our analysis of Notes from the Underground. This is a kind of anti-Notes from the Underground. It's a kind of light and dark. The White Nights of this book to really the dark days and the dark dungeon of Notes from the Underground. So what we have here is, again, we have a character who seems to be in a kind of dream state. He is the most unlucky in love, by the way. The character in this, who is the speaker, the dreamer, the nameless speaker in this is really, again, this is something that's indicative of 19th century romanticism and really does point the way towards modernity in literature because, again, we get a first-person perspective, first-person point of view. We get a nameless narrator who is both archetypal and representative of a kind of everyman for us. It's not a true everyman. This is not Brian Griffin's. I'm going to call him Norm Hull because he's just a normal guy. This is really Elon says White Nights is good, more of a romanticism feel that Dostoevsky usually gets. That's Elon. You're exactly right about that. This is before the jaded events of his later life, and it does have bits of promising ebullient Christianity at its core of this book. It's a real novella where we have a character who is locked into the dreamlike status of a young man who is wandering about the labyrinth of the city, lost in a kind of urban wilderness, who is swallowed up in the height of his thoughts, which is something that I really think that young thinkers in their 20s are constantly suffering from even today. And what he learns at the end of the book, I'm going to kind of skip around here, what he learns at the end of the book, because he does, there are points in the book where the book threatens to make him the simp of all simps. He finds this girl, he's walking along, he is totally jaded by the world. He can't really do anything. He's living in this shabby apartment with this old woman, and he's walking around St. Petersburg in 19th century Russia, and he sees this beautiful girl who is crying on the street, and then she gets chased by a man, so he finds a way to talk to her by defending her and being a white knight. So he defends her in a white knight situation and then says, hey, I can talk to you. And I realize this is probably a little much. So he's getting his, he's really getting, what do they say? Oh, it's going to be so cringe. He gets his riz on. Kudos to him for going up and talking to the girl and not being a total, river cell who's locked into his thoughts of the river and the flow of time and the existential crisis going on in his life, and he just ignores the girl and all events around him. He doesn't do that. He actually goes up and he talks to the girl and he saves her. But he's also not used to talking to women. He's a young man who's lost in his thoughts. He's not used to talking to women. And he basically says, I can walk with you a while. And they end up talking. And she ends up, the book is over a series of a few nights followed by the morning, and she basically says that her problem is that she's in love with this guy. Well, that's a bad sign. Well, she's in love with this guy, and he has left her, and he's promised to. He's written a letter. He's promised to, at this point, he hadn't written a letter. He's promised to return in a year, and she's come to the place, and he has not returned, and she's totally in love with this guy. And he says, next best thing is, I'm kind of a smart guy. I'm pretty good with words. I'll help you write a letter to the guy. And they promise to each other basically that they will not fall in love, and it'll just be a situation where they meet up with somebody of the opposite sex and they're friends, and that's fine. And that really is a kind of sign of a maturing adulthood that occurs, that zooms towards him in 1 minute of the book, because that is something that you only achieve, I think, when you're older. The ability to be friends and to have healthy, normal relationships with people of all kinds, that are totally devoid of anything else. When you're young, it's very difficult. When you're young in your 20s, I think I can speak for a lot of people. When you're in your early 20s, it's very difficult to like be friends with girls, especially hot girls. It's very difficult to like be friends with hot girls and not want it to be something else. Of course, that's natural. That's fine. But when you get older, you get a sense of a kind of healthy distance between people, and you know who you are, and you know exactly what you want, and you're not willing to, sort of prostrate yourself on the weird altar or symptom with any woman that you meet. And hopefully you find the woman that you love, and you're going to stick with her, and everything else is wholesome. So he sort of does that with her, and they keep meeting up, and eventually, because he is unapproachable in the book, she starts to fall in love with him. So again, this is a kind of life lesson that we get from the book. The guy who is desperate has nothing going for him. He is just oozing with desperation, and so that's unattractive. But the moment that he becomes unattainable or unapproachable, she, of course, starts to fall in love with him. And then she wonders why he hasn't fallen in love with her. Well, because he made a promise. But then he admits that, yeah, he does have feelings for her. So eventually they write the letter and they send it off. The guy doesn't come back. He doesn't come back for her. And then they decide, hey, we're going to be in love. And now we found each other. So this is what happens in life. You fall in love, you fall out of love. Some people, you're not going to meet the right one right away. Hopefully you will, but you're going to go through a whole series of people, and you'll, all that stuff, and then eventually you'll find the right one. That's natural. But then, anybody want a peanut? But then, of course, and you can see this happening in the book. You know it's going to happen right when they fall in love. The guy appears, and then she books it and splits right out of his arms, and she's in love with the guy again. Isn't that life? Isn't that the way it goes when you're younger? I don't know, not to me. No, but this is something that happens, and then so then she comes back to him and says, "Hey, I wish I could be in love with both of you," and that's weird. Nope, that ain't gonna happen. So then he goes off, but the great thing about the book is that instead of resigning himself to a dark world full of being incelled into oblivion, now he realizes that there is hope, there is grace. He gives her grace. He's happy for her that she's fallen in love. He goes back to his apartment, and he realizes that life is worth living. Shouts out to Ruckus right there. Hey, Ruckus gifted a membership. Thank you so much for that, Ruckus. Shouts out to Alternate Current Radio. Everybody should go to Alternate Current Radio on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe there. Make sure you watch Boiler Room on Thursday nights, and check out all of Ruckus's shows, and, of course, Hesher and all of our friends. So the book is really interesting because, again, one thing that occurs that brings to mind The Princess Bride in a way is that, of course, here we have love. Okay, we have what it takes to be in love, and how true love sort of conquers all. The character in White Knights finds that, and this isn't explicitly so in the book, but that his love of God becomes the lens through which he has love for humanity, which is the way that it should be. And we also see that landscapes, houses, windows, just like every other work, especially of 19th century literature that we've covered, they always convey a sense of the exterior, the exterior sense of the character's inner psyche. So I often bring up Wuthering Heights is a great example of this. By the way, they're making a new Wuthering Heights with Margot Robbie. We'll see. There have been a lot of Wuthering Heights versions. I don't know why they keep doing them. Maybe this one will be different. I really do think that the Ray Fiennes, Juliette Binoche, Wuthering Heights is fantastic. It's got that great scene where, close your eyes. When you open your eyes, if you see lightness and sunshine, so shall your future be. But if you see darkness and dread, your world will become full of thunder. So she opens her eyes and she sees a great, effervescent day, and then you hear this, and and he turns her around, and they're in profile standing on the moors, and her life is going to be full of danger and despair. Well, the house in Wuthering Heights and the windows, just like in much of 19th century literature and in basically all of literature, again, they sort of force us to look at the inner states of the characters through an exterior modality, I'll say. And we get that with this. We also see that Dostoevsky does something interesting here. This is really in the same sort of tradition as even Arthur Schnitzler's not Eyes Wide Shut, his Dream Story, which I've covered here, which is the basis for Eyes Wide Shut, or Edgar Allan Poe's William Wilson. William Wilson is the story of the guy who trails the guy around the city and then meets his doppelganger. What else? I actually wrote a note down here so I wouldn't forget it. Also, Hesse. Remember Hesse? Remember we covered Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf? 19th century, especially European literature, does this quite frequently, where we have a character, a nameless character, who is trying to find his self, not just his identity, but trying to find his true self in a labyrinthine search through the wilderness for love and for meaning. And we really get this, and it's a kind of crossover from Romanticism into modernity, where we get, instead of the exterior moors and the natural landscape of darkness and despair, we get urbanity and the city. And I think this is a pretty fantastic book. We're going to have to cover some more Dostoevsky. We'll probably do the Brothers Karamazov at some point, and we need to do Crime and Punishment. We were going to do Demons a long time ago. Tristan did Demons. You can watch it there. But on pages 12, on pages 22 and 23, Dreamers, purely fantastical and fervently ideal. And it's also dingily prosaic, I wrote in the book. It's ordinary, and it's credibly vulgar. This is his kind of search through what we would get in France. Orwell does this in Down and Out in Paris and London. Rimbaud does this in Illuminations. Baudelaire does this in Flowers of Evil. This is a really 19th century world on the cusp between the Industrial Revolution and the modern world. There's a great passage. I want to read just a couple of brief passages in this book because they're pretty beautiful. On pages 62 and 63, he talks about how when he touches her hand is cold, and his burns like fire, which is an extension of course, of his inner state. He's a thinker. He's a dreamer. She answered, "If I were less happy, I believe I should cry at your lack of faith, at your reproaches. However, you made me think and have given me a lot to think about. But I shall think later, and now own that you were right. Yes, I'm somehow not myself. I'm all suspense and feel everything as it were too lightly. But hush, that's enough about feelings." At that moment, we heard footsteps, and in the darkness, we saw a figure coming towards us. We both started. She almost cried out. I dropped her hand and made a movement as though to walk away, but we were mistaken. It was not he. "What are you afraid of? Why did you let go of my hand?" she said, giving it to me again. "Come, what is it? We will meet him together. I want him to see how fond we are of each other." "How fond we are of each other," I cried. "Oh, Nastenka, Nastenka," I thought. "How much you've told me in that saying. Such fondness at certain moments makes the heart cold and the soul heavy. Your hand is cold. Mine burns like fire. How blind you are. Oh, how unbearable a happy person is sometimes. But I could not be angry with her." And then another one is, let's see, the self-sacrifice on pages 67 and 68. "Why is it that even the best of men always seem to hide something from other people and to keep something back? Why not say straight out what is in one's heart when one knows what one is speaking idly? As it is, everyone seems harsher than he really is, as though all were afraid of doing injustice to their feelings by being too quick to express them." "What you say is true, but there are many reasons for that," I broke in, suppressing my own feelings at that moment more than ever. No, here you, for instance, are not like other people. I really don't know how to tell you what I feel, but it seems to me that you, for instance, at the present moment, it seems to me that you are sacrificing something for me," she added timidly with a fleeting glance at me. "Forgive me for saying so." She says, "I'm a simple girl, you know. I've seen very little of life, and I really sometimes don't know how to say things," she added in a voice that quivered with some hidden feeling while she tried to smile. "But I only wanted to tell you that I'm grateful, that I feel it all too. Oh, may God give you happiness for it. What you told me about your dreamer is quite untrue now. That is, I mean, it's not true of you. You're recovering. You're quite a different man from what you described. If you ever fall in love with someone, God give you happiness with her. I won't wish anything for her, for she will be happy with you. I know I'm a woman myself, so you must believe me when I tell you so. And then the chapter ends with a kind of, I think, an unintentional reference to Macbeth. So it says, I went home more depressed than I'd ever been. What a damp, dreary day. If it had been fine, I should have walked about all night. But tomorrow, she will tell me everything. The letter's not come today, however, but that was to be expected. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, is the fatalistic, megalomaniacal statement of Macbeth after he has completely lost touch with reality at the behest and as the agent of a demonic sacrificial Black Sabbath that the very wife who has just died has foisted upon him and which he willingly took part in. There are a few Rambodian parts of this book, and by Rambodian I mean basically the 19th century illumination of a Gnostic gospel come to life as a character looks for themselves in a world where duality seems to be both ungraspable and fully there at the moment. Because Rimbaud, at the end of A Season in Hell, of course, says, hell is certainly down below. And then finally, pages... Oh, God, this is great. Let me read this. This is page 28 in the book. Then I'm going to move on to Susan Sontag. He looked not with indifference on the evening, because oftentimes, I was talking to Tristan about this earlier, oftentimes in especially postmodern literature, when we look at, and this would be truly postmodern literature, so we're talking about pre-Big Nine, especially with, so 1945 to about 2001, when we look at authors like Don DeLillo, and Cormac McCarthy, and also J.G. Ballard and Bret Easton Ellis, one of the things that occurs in the kind of four corners of what I consider the four corners of postmodernism, one thing that often occurs is that the paragraphs between dialogue are where we see a true paradigmatic prism of how they see the world. And this is a world that is obsessive over industrial cataclysms like plane crashes and train crashes and also war zonal garbage. Remember in Don DeLillo's Underworld. And finally, we see this kind of Gnostic duality that occurs where characters don't feel at home. They have to break on through to the other side. But in J.G. Ballard's sort of vision, the future will be boring and there is no escape from this. So what we see here is not that, because we are pre-modern here. We're still in the Victorian era if we're looking at English literature. Dostoevsky's literature, I think, is kind of defined by a sort of, in an overall sense, a kind of post-romantic, moving into Bismarckian realpolitik 19th century sort of total war birth of colonialism and collapse, but also an awakening of a Christian spirit, especially with Dostoevsky. He looked not with indifference on the evening glow, which was the evening red in the west, right? He looked not with indifference on the evening glow, which was slowly fading on the cold Petersburg sky. When I say he looked, I'm lying. He did not look at it, but saw it, as it were, without realizing, as though tired or preoccupied with some other more interesting subject, so that he could scarcely spare a glance for anything about him. He was pleased because till next day he was released from business irksome to him, and happy as a schoolboy to be let out from the classroom to his games and mischief. Think of Fred Savage, the last thing we were just reading. Take a look at him. You will see at once that joyful emotion has already had an effect on his weak nerves and morbidly excited fancy. You see he's thinking of something, of dinner, do you imagine? Of the evening. What is he looking at like that? Is it at that gentleman of dignified appearance who is bowing so picturesquely to the lady who rolls by in a carriage drawn by prancing horses? No. What are all those trivialities to him now? He is rich now with his own individual life. He has suddenly become rich, and it is not for nothing that the fading sunset sheds its farewell gleams so gaily before him and calls forth a swarm of impressions from his warmed heart. Now he hardly notices the road on which the tiniest details at other times would strike him. Now the, quote, goddess of fancy, if you've read Zukofsky, has already with fantastic hands spun her golden warp and began weaving it upon it patterns of marvelous magic life. And who knows, maybe her fantastic hand has borne him to the seventh crystal heaven, far from the excellent granite pavement on which he was walking his way. Try stopping him now. Ask him suddenly where he's standing now, through what streets he's going. He will probably remember nothing, neither where he's going nor where he's standing now, and flushing with vexation, he will certainly tell some lie to save appearances. That's why he starts, almost cries out, and looks round with horror when a respectable old lady stops him politely in the middle of the pavement and asks her way. Frowning with vexation, he strides on, scarcely noticing that more than one passerby smiles and turns round to look after him, and that a little girl moving out of his way in alarm laughs aloud, gazing open-eyed at his broad meditative smile and gesticulations. But fancy catches up in its playful flight the old woman, the curious passersby, and the laughing child, and the peasants spending their nights in their barges on Fontanka. Our hero, let us suppose, is walking along the canal side at that moment, and capriciously weaves everyone and everything into the canvas like a fly in a spider's web. So that is Dostoevsky's White Nights. If you like this stream, you guys, please make sure you smash that like and share it out. I would really appreciate that. I will share that right now I'm just starting to read Dying Earth. So I'm reading some sci-fi. This is Dying Earth by Jack Vance. I'll be covering that at some point in the future. We'll also probably do a Jaws stream because it was the 50th anniversary, and I did put it off for the summer. But I'm teaching it right now in a film and lit class. And we probably need to discuss Jaws. I mean, it is the blockbuster. It is one of the movies it's another movie that's considered a perfect film. We'll discuss whether we think that or not, but it is a fantastic film. So we'll look into Jaws by Spielberg, 1975. We'll see some of those things, and if you want to see that. Also, I've got I don't know. I've got a bunch of stuff that I need to cover here. So smash that like. But most importantly, you guys, look at the pinned link at the top. And if you would, check out a copy of my book, Runes, right here. It is up on Amazon. I published it August 31st. It went live 2 days ago. And a bunch of copies have already sold so far, a bunch. So thank you to everybody who's bought a copy of my book, Runes. It is a book of personae poems of megalomania through characterization in the Third Reich, Imperial Rome, and Troubles era paramilitary Northern Ireland. So strong language advisory when you read it. And I hope it already got to you. If you got it, Ruckus and Hesher, I think, are going to help me put up my page on the ACR website. And at some point, I will also be adding an audio only Spreaker for the channel, so you can listen on the go. You can already do that right now through YouTube, but it'll also help for those who want to access that. And also, thank you, Jason. Jason says, you guys, Runes is so good. I absolutely love it. Thank you, Jason, so much. Really appreciate your kind words. Thank you for promoting it. And yes, Daniel Lotus right there says, got to read White Nights. I recommend reading White Nights. Also on ACR, I'll be putting up some sort of option for signed copies. I don't have that right now, but I really appreciate people having an interest in it and wanting a signed copy. So at some point, we'll be doing that and putting that up on the ACR website. So thank you so much. The last thing I wanted to go over here is, you guys might not know, I read so you don't have to, or to inspire you to read further into things. And I would recommend that you read one of the cornerstones of modernity, which is the critic Susan Sontag. Now, Susan Sontag is one of these authors born July 15th. She is one of these authors born July 15th. Right? She's another one of these authors born July 15th. Okay? She is another one of these authors that our good friend Rachel Wilson, wrote her book about. So keep that in mind. But it's important to read these people because what she said has come to pass, and also because she is, whether you like it or not, whether we like it or not, it's important to read these people, because these people born July 15th, because she really is one of the one of the big critics and theorists, especially of 20th century literature, really the modern era, even though she's writing in the postmodern era, really in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But just like we covered with Joan Didion is more of a sort of a narrative essayist when it comes to, as compared to Susan Sontag. But the way, if you really want to understand the way that academia has come to be, especially through the lens of critical theory and especially regarding literature, it's important to read someone like Susan Sontag so you can understand it. And I find that her essay approaching Artaud is pretty esoteric. It's a pretty deep dive into Antonin Artaud, about whom I already knew a lot. I've got all the translations of Antonin Artaud. I've got all of his books up there. I discovered Artaud through when I was 11 years old, and the Doors movie came out. This is the way cultural context allows you to discover books. And especially as a young man, it's kind of like every young dude sort of at some point probably gets into the Beat Generation, right? Well, it's the same with, discovering literature through music. And the way that I discovered Rimbaud was through Jim Morrison and through the Doors movie when I was 11 years old. The way that I discovered Artaud was, do you remember the sequence when Jim and Pam are up on Trick's rooftop, right? And he's about to, he says, I find I'm most alive through confronting death. And they're talking about their, sort of hippie nonsense. But he's about to recite Moonlight Drive to, Moonlight Drive, let's swim to the moon. He's going to, and we laugh like soft, mad children smug in the woolly cotton brains of infancy. The music and voices are all around us. Choose, they croon the ancient ones. The time has come again. Choose now, they croon the ancient moon beside the ancient lake. Enter the hot dream, come with us. Enter the, everything is broken up in dances. Anyway, so in that sequence, when they first show Jim, the camera is panning by a bunch of books. And two of the books are Rimbaud's Season in Hell and, of course, Antonin Artaud's The Theater and Its Double. And I saw that when I was 11 years old, and I thought, what is that? And then I read about Jim Morrison in No One Here Gets Out Alive by Jerry Hopkins. And when Jim said that the Doors were erotic politicians and that his focuses really were chaos and activity, chaos, destruction, activities which seem to have no meaning, like this. And he talked about how basically pushing in the 60s, pushing an audience to the point of riot was the most avant-garde form of theater. Of course, then he went and saw The Beard with Michael McClure, who was a Beat Generation playwright. All these things led me on to Artaud. And so finally, now at age 44, I've come to read Susan Sontag's essay on Artaud, and it is pretty. It is everything I expected it to be, and I didn't learn much new from it, but it is good to sort of polish our minds on these sorts of things. So she starts off saying this is important for understanding modernity. She says the movement to disestablish the author has been at work for over 100 years. From the start, the impetus was and still is apocalyptic, vivid with complaint and jubilation at the convulsive decay of old social orders, borne up by that worldwide sense of living through a revolutionary movement which continues to animate most moral and intellectual exercise. That is modernity moving into postmodernity, tearing down the ancien regime, tearing down the old order, and starting something new, getting rid of all the old morals and mores. And this is morality. This is a guiding principle for everything that happens now. She She says modern authors can be recognized by their effort to disestablish themselves by their will not to be morally and useful to the community, by their inclination to present themselves not as social critics but as seers, spiritual adventurers, and social pariahs. That's what Artaud was. That's what Rimbaud was. Rimbaud said one must become a seer through a long, prolonged derangement of the senses to attain the unknown. Although I live in the subconscious, our pale reason hides the infinite from us. Jim quoted that, and that's a mix of Rimbaud and Blake. We're going to be covering Northrop Frye's Fearful Symmetry in toto when I can get to it. She says, being an author has been unmasked as a role that, whether conformist or not, remains inescapably responsible to a given social order. One of the author's most ancient roles is to call the community to account for the hypocrisies and bad faith, as Juvenal in Satire scores the follies of the Roman aristocracy, and Richardson and Clarissa denounce the bourgeois institutions of property marriage, but the range of alienation available to pre-modern authors was still limited, and there henceforth is a general devaluation of values. Listen to this on page. This is just on one of the first. This is on page 16 of the book. Listen to this. She says, in the view initiated by the romantic sensibility, what is produced by the artist or the philosopher contains as a regulating internal structure an account of the labors of subjectivity. Work derives its credentials from its place in a singular lived experience. It assumes an inexhaustible personal totality of which the work is a byproduct and inadequately expressive of that totality. Art becomes a statement of self-awareness, an awareness that presupposes a disharmony between the self of the artist and the community. Indeed, the artist's effort is measured by the size of its rupture with the collective voice of reason. The artist is a consciousness trying to be. I am he who, in order to be, must whip his innateness, writes Artaud. Modern literature's most didactic and most uncompromising hero of self-exacerbation. In principle, the project cannot succeed. This is post-modernity. The phrase lived experience occurs right here. What she's saying is that when you tear down all the old orders and when you tear away values and when you get rid of morality and you get rid of everything good and you have basically a restructuring of society through the lens of art, then you basically are only left with lived experience. And that is seen as a virtue to these people. That is a virtue to them. And eventually that leads into a new esotericism and a new occult. That's why Artaud became this toothless, schizophrenic, morphine-addicted mystic who went to Ireland with a magic shillelagh in search of becoming a kind of priest of nihilism and ended up insane. That's why Artaud's theater of cruelty and his theater of blood, I'm just going to summarize a lot of what this book says. Artaud's theories of theater are not the kind of Jodorowsky or not Jerzy Grotowski. The kind of Grotowski sense of like living theater and lab theater, where we have an audience who sits there and watches a bunch of insane people like acting in an insane asylum, or like the play Marat Sade. That's not what Artaud goes even further than that. He says basically that life is the greatest work of art is the work that is produced for no one, and that there is a kind of seamlessness between life and politics and art, so that you are in the theater and you don't even know it. And Artaud's whole mode, which is really set the stage for life now in a number of ways, and it guides artistic principles and has really come to pass 100 years later, is what he's saying is that there's nothing that is, in his eyes, there's nothing virtuous and there's nothing good that provides a gravitational hold on us, a grounding, and which thereby gives us something to look up to. The only things that matter for him are violence and destruction. So this goes past Nietzsche. It goes past any kind of nihilistic, fatalistic guiding point in postmodern literature or in artistic ventures. This is where we go into something that is purely demonic spiritually, and where the only way to feel is to feel less and less and less by doing more that is debased and more that's to be ashamed of, because there is no more shame. That's what Susan Sontag is saying of Artaud. And really, she goes on a she really does go on a into a full defining of Gnosticism. This is crazy. This book really is crazy. It's a series of essays. It really is crazy because there's some things to really take away from here that are true. One of which is that, and this deals with even with Princess Bride, which is that great works of art. First of all, she says all romantic works of art are essentially a heroism. It's a heroism and a breaking through. And she says that the great works of art are either genre defining or they dissolve the former genres, and that's essentially true. I mean, look at Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is one of my favorite streams was our Heart of Darkness stream, and that's where Joseph Conrad, writing in his third language, really does dissolve all of the 19th century literature and push us into something that is so highly modern it is almost incomprehensible to us even now. It's the thoughts of a person throughout time on paper in a way that they cannot be said. Hugh Kenner, the great critic of Ezra Pound and William Carlos Williams, when he was talking about William Carlos Williams and his poem, The Red Wheelbarrow, which is an imagist poem in the early 20th century. Everybody's read this in school. The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Right? Or Ezra Pound's In a Station of the Metro. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. Everybody who reads those says, what is this? Well, it's just the image. It's just the thing. It's the thing itself. Hugh Kenner said that the way to understand and imagine those poems is that one cannot imagine those words being said. So if the best words in the best order is the definition of poetry, according to Coleridge, then that means that those things that cannot imagine being said are the height of poetry. And if that's the case, then where do we go from there when we get into a world that is completely it was broken with the wasteland, it was broken in World War I, and we get this rift from the Industrial Revolution leading into modernity, and now we end up with a overtly spiritual Gnostic quest for blood. She says here on page 49, she talks about the avant-garde. Page 48, in modern culture, powerful machinery has been set up whereby dissident work, after gaining an initial semi-official status as avant-garde, is gradually absorbed and rendered acceptable. But Artaud's practical activities in the theater barely qualified for this kind of co-optation. Artaud became a member of the Surrealists. I did a whole stream on the on Surrealism and Andre Breton's Surrealist Manifesto, which was a cult intrinsically, but Artaud was even too much for these people. The project of creating in a secular culture an institution that can manifest a dark hidden reality is a contradiction in terms. Artaud was never able to found his Bayreuth, though he would have liked to, for his ideas are the kind that cannot be institutionalized. The year after the failure of the Sensi, that's an Artaud play, Artaud embarked on a trip to Mexico to witness that demonic reality in a still existing primitive culture. That happens now. Do you understand? That happens now. That's the DMT quest. Unsuccessful at embodying this reality in a spectacle to impose on others, he became a spectator of it himself. From 1935 onward, Artaud lost touch with the promise of an ideal art form. His writings, always didactic, now took on prophetic tone and referred frequently to esoteric magical systems like the Kabbalah and Tarot. Apparently, Artaud came to believe that he could exercise directly in his own person the emotional power and achieve the spiritual efficacy he had wanted for the theater. In the middle of 1937, he traveled to the Aran Islands with an obscure plan for exploring or confirming his magical powers. The wall between art and life was still down, but instead of everything being assimilated into art, the movement swung the other way, and Artaud moved without mediation into his life, a dangerous, careering object, the vessel of a raging hunger for total transformation, which could never find its appropriate nourishment. Artaud's idea of actor training is an insane person screaming and growling, not because it athletically exercises the tones of the character getting back to some sort of Stanislavski inner primitive state, a primordial state, but because it is the natural language of the beast man. This says the leading energies of Gnosticism come from metaphysical anxiety and acute psychological distress, the sense of being abandoned, of being an alien, of being possessed by demonic powers which prey on the human spirit in a cosmos vacated by the divine. That's the satanic ideal of these people. The cosmos is in itself a battlefield. Well, it is, and each human life exhibits the conflict between the repressive, persecuting forces from without and the feverish, afflicted individual spirit seeking redemption. The demonic forces of the cosmos exist as physical matter. They also exist as, quote, law, taboos, prohibitions. Thus, in the Gnostic metaphors, the spirit is abandoned, fallen, trapped in a body, and the individual is repressed, trapped by being in, quote, the world, what we would call, quote, society. It is a mark of all Gnostic thinking to polarize inner space, the psyche, and a vague outer space, the world or society, which is identified with repression, making little or no acknowledgement of the importance of mediating levels of the various social spheres and institutions. The self or spirit discovers itself in a break with, quote, the world. The only freedom possible is an inhuman, desperate freedom. To be saved, the spirit must be taken out of its body, out of its personality, out of the world. That's why Artaud says, I is an other. That's one of the epigraphs to my book, Runes. I is an other, because the book is about personae and characters who are fractured psyches, the fractured psyche of a megalomaniacal mind within a kind of fractured world throughout time. But this is, and that's also Rimbaud's sort of guiding spirit when we're talking about his what I call his Gnostic gospel, which is his book A Season in Hell. But these are all antithetical to, of course, well, there is truth and there is a way to be saved, and of course that's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You be saved through Jesus Christ, and all of this becomes moot, and you are in a spiritual battle for your soul. But this is pure Gnosticism, what we're reading. When Artaud admires, in page 54, in the Balinese theater, he writes in 1931, is that it has nothing to do with entertainment, but rather something of the ceremonial quality of the religious rite. So this is just Artaud reiterating what theater was in its original provenance, in its original sort of birth mode in something like Euripides the Bacchae, right, which is a Greek religious rite ceremony of a Bacchic ritual, where we have, it's like Jim Morrison said again, the women wore masks and roved the countryside, tearing the men apart and making the men go crazy, mixed with total intoxication, as if that takes you to the spiritual climbs and heights of the escape from the world, and in order to break on through to the other side. This says on page 56 and 57, but the body is always a problem. Artaud never defines the body in terms of its capacity for sensuous pleasure, but always in terms of its electric capacity for intelligence and for pain. As Artaud laments in Art and Death that his mind is ignorant of his body, that he lacks ideas that conform to his condition as a physical animal, so he complains that his body is ignorant of his mind. In Artaud's imagery of distress, body and spirit prevent each other from being intelligent. He speaks of the intellectual cries that come from his flesh, source of the only knowledge he trusts. Body has a mind. There is a mind in the flesh, he writes, a mind quick as lightning. Do you understand? This all seems like esoteric, poetic theory and theater, but this is absolutely what guides academia and intellect, the idea of the academic and the intellectual pursuit melding with politics now. This is the world now. This is what we see when we watch the news. The Gnostic task of the theater that Artaud imagines is nothing less than to create this redeemed body, a mythic project that he explains by referring to that last great Gnostic systematics, Renaissance alchemy. Artaud's principal metaphors are classically Gnostic. Body is mind turned into matter. So that is essentially Susan Sontag in her essay on Artaud. She also has an essay on Roland Barthes and on Romanticism. She's got one. She's got essays on fascism, which are pretty interesting in terms of how the July 15th people see fascism and see art and see history and major war movements leading towards a kind of liberation theology. So I would, Under the Sign of Saturn is the title of the book, and that Under the Sign of Saturn is an essay on Walter Benjamin, where she essentially says that the artists, especially Walter Benjamin or certain theorists, tend to bring down the whole world with them because they are born under a melancholic sign. And so anyway, that's I think that's pretty interesting as a counterpoint to something like, of all things, The Princess Bride. You may see that as something of a stretch, but I see that as those as kind of two completely different worlds that exist in art. And I think, again, like C.S. Lewis said, that those who are afraid to be taken, they're too afraid of being taken in. When it comes to time to be taken out, they won't be taken out. They will be given God's feast, and they will only see stable food and hay and garbage, because they are completely. This is the total definition of being totally black-pilled, because of the degradation and deprivation that we see in terms of art, politics, and the world now. So that is Susan Sontag, Princess Bride, and let's see, we've been going for almost 2 hours here. You guys, I think I'm gonna call it for a night. Let's see if we have any support here. If you want to support, again, you can support through the links provided. Hey, Jason dropped $10 on PayPal. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you, man. And Jason gave me wrote me a great DM on Instagram about my book, and so thank you so much for that. Really appreciate your kind words. I've had a bunch of books sold. So thank you so much to everybody who's bought a book. I tried to set as I said this last week, but I set the price, because I set the price on there, and I set it as low as it could possibly go, because it's a book of poetry. This is a book that, some people may not own a single other book of poetry in their life. And I realize that, and I really appreciate that, and I'm thankful. So I tried to make it as low as possible. Again, this is Runes. I will have signed copies up on ACR as soon as I can get them done. It's 84 pages. It's about, 65 poems in here. Again, they're all lyric poems. You can read these. Again, strong language, and I hope that you will get a copy of my book Runes, and you'll read it. Again, you can click the link right there in the pinned message, and it'll get to you in a few days. Really appreciate that. Hey guys, if anybody is in town tomorrow, I will be at the event in Stafford. I'm going to go up there. Jay is giving a speech at the conference on Philip Ludwell III in Stafford, Virginia. So I will be up there seeing Jay and Jamie, and Father Turbo will be there. Metropolitan Jonah, Buck Johnson's going to be there. A bunch of people are going to be there. So if you're there, come say hi to me. I'll be there. I'll probably be at the merch table. I think I'm going to be selling books for Jay and Jamie over at the merch table. So come by and say hello. And let's see what else we got here. Maddie. I'm not going to share Maddie's text here. I don't want to dox him. Maddie's saying, hey, you want to... Okay, Maddie and I are going to stream. We're going to do an analysis of Desperado, El Mariachi, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. So I'm giving that a like right now. Thank you to Maddie. Thank you to everybody who has supported me. Thank you to all longtime supporters. Thank you for the memberships. Those really helped me out, especially when I was in the depths of writing this. Most of the book had been written for 20 years. I wrote it back when I was in grad school in Belfast. I've got a list of places at the beginning of the book. You'll see if you buy the book that this is a stack. This is the stack of drafts. I went through just this time in terms of formatting the book. And there's a list of places. At the beginning, it says Initium Sapiente Timor Domini, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And then I have Belfast, Bristol. I was in drama school in Bristol. Virginia, that's where I live. New York, where I lived in 2005, 2006. Kuala Lumpur, that was in Malaysia. I lived there for summer 2005 when I was working on the book. Rome and Mississippi. Those are all places that are important to me in terms of writing the book. I worked on it, I mainly wrote this in Belfast in 2005, 2006. And Paul Muldoon, the Pulitzer Prize winner, Paul Muldoon, author of Horse Latitudes, which happens to be a Jim Morrison poem. When the still sea conspires in armor and a sullen and aborted currents breed tiny monsters, true sailing is dead. That's a Jim Morrison poem. It's also the title of a Paul Muldoon book, who's a Northern Irish poet. He won the Pulitzer Prize. He actually read the book, and I saw him at University of Richmond after that, and he didn't know that I'd written it, and he said, "Hey, you're the guy who wrote that book." That was really cool. That was a highlight of my life. So, one of them. So that's cool. And I sat on the book for about 20 years trying to, figure out how to get it published. So I decided to put it up now. But I added to the book in about 10 years after that. Well, first 2011, 2015, and then I added to it a little bit this time. And then I completely reworked a lot of it. And so now that's the final product. But this was a learning curve to learn how to format a book in terms of publication. And it really was, I'll just say this. This was a real labor, and I really wanted to. This was what I consider my life's goal and life's work was to really get this book out, and it really did. Anybody who makes anything, anybody who creates anything, any type of work you do, how it can be all consuming. And I really did work on this book, formatting the book to get published now for about a month straight, with very little sleep and all night for weeks. And I'm thankful that God has given me the ability to do that, and I think that that we all see that sort of work and diligence in aspects of our lives, but it was pretty heavy, and it had health effects. I won't get into that, but it had pretty serious health effects on me, and so I'm glad to be through that because now I'm finished with it. My next book, which I'll start working on, I don't know. I'm getting married. In very, very soon, and so I really would appreciate your support, your continued support. My 45th birthday is coming up next week, and then after that, I'll be getting married, and we'll be going on our honeymoon. So we're starting a new life, and pretty soon all this will be moved. All this will be moved to our new house, and so it might look exactly the same, but we'll all be moved. All this has got to go. So I really would appreciate help with that. We got to get a new car. We got to get our way up to where we're going on our honeymoon, and maybe during that week I will be working on my book. I doubt it, but I will be working. I've already written the novel. I've already written my novel, West Hampton, so I just got to add some things to it. That's going to take a few months, and then I'll be putting that out there for you. It's called West Hampton. That's All the President's Children. That's basically, if I'd published this years ago, then it would have been very prescient in terms of the Hunter Biden story, because there's a lot. It's a fictional novel. There's a lot that occurs that is basically like his life. It's fucked up rich kids. So that's what that book will be about. Then I've got to work on my book Generation, which is a screenplay. I might turn that into another novel. We'll see. That's Generation that I've been working on all summer. And then I've got my main novel, which is called Monarch, and is the story of a teen winter soldier who finds himself surviving the most dangerous game and becomes a serial killer wearing a mask of his own face with mirror shards for eyes, who hunts down his victim list of programmers. So that one I've only got about 3 chapters of, that one I've put off because it's been very, very difficult to write, and so that will come out sometime. But there's a lot in the works for you guys, and that this was kind of the whole purpose. I mean, the whole purpose of this channel was obviously literary and then later film analysis. But it's one thing to analyze other people's work, but my purpose has always been in my life to make my own work. And so I'm doing that, and I hope you guys like it or buy it or get it. Again, please buy my book Runes. See what you think. So that's about it. So Contra says I'm about as checked out and do as little as possible. I understand that. I completely understand that. And that's why I'm also here to do this stuff for you so you don't have to. So I appreciate that statement. Hey, listen, thank you again for the support. Let me look at and see if we got any super chats in here. And I know we got some support. Thank you also to Ethan, who continuously supports me. Thank you to Buster, who continuously supports me. My friend Andrew H, who supports me. Shouts out to Gorilla Biscuits right there, who sent 1 membership. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Michael H. Welcome to High IQ Book Enjoyer. Shouts out to, is this Pablo? He says, let me give you a heart right there. It's $5 super chat. I missed the last stream live. Almost missed this one. BLA at 2 times is a wild ride. I know. I already speak. Forgive me for speaking so fast. I don't mean to speak so fast. I know I speak at kind of a rapid rate. That's just the way that I kind of do things. Sometimes I feel like, kind of like you guys. I know you guys probably feel this way. Like when there's a lot to be said, I almost sometimes race to say it, to remember it or get it out. So I'm sorry if it moves at a rapid rate. Also, I know I have limited time with you guys, so I want to get as much out as I can because people are doing things, you're living lives. I hope somebody out there is listening to this, taking that long drive across the country, looking at the lightning storms in the distance, or sitting at home alone, or working, or making dinner, or whatever you're doing. Whatever you're doing out there, I really appreciate you listening. I really do. I mean, we're sitting here talking about literature and film, and there's a lot going on in the world. So I thank you for even one person supporting me with this stuff. Thank you so much, Pablo. Really appreciate you. And I think that is about it. Please forgive me if you super chatted me and I did not get to it. I will get to it next time. Thank you to all the people who have supported me. Let's see. Yeah, Chris. I thanked Chris last time. I just want to go through a couple of these and make sure. Thank you to Chris who supported me last time. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Ethan. Continued support. Really appreciate that. Hey, Brandon said stay late. That was a while ago. Thank you for that, Brandon. Appreciate you. And let's see. Thank you to Jason and all your support. Really appreciate you, man. And also Quinn, who supported me big time back in July with the marriage announcement. Thank you so much. Hey, guys, if you want to support me, you can do that on the channel links, in the video description, in the streams, in the live chat. Please stop by and give me and say hi in the live chat sometime. Again, I will be out there tomorrow. You guys, if you're there, please stop by. I'll be back soon. I'll be doing more member streams. I've done a lot of member streams in the recent past. Please check those out. I've been trying. I want to thank my members. So I will move stuff over to members, or I'll do stuff only for members. So to show my appreciation for you guys. So thank you so much for doing that. I'll also be seeing. I need to see the movie Weapons. I'm going to see the Leonardo DiCaprio movie with Benicio del Toro, the new Paul Thomas Anderson. I'll definitely be covering that. I'll definitely be covering the new Daniel Day-Lewis movie. This is a Daniel Day-Lewis film about the Troubles. It's clearly about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So it's got him and Sean Bean in it. Sean Bean. It's directed by, I think, his son Ronan. Remember that Daniel Day-Lewis is married to Arthur Miller's daughter, Rebecca Miller. That's who directed The Crucible back in the day. We've covered that. We covered that with Rachel. Shouts out to all of our friends. Thank you to Jerry for having me on recently. Shouts out to Jerry for promoting my book. Really appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Thanks to all my friends and family. And you guys, that's about it. I'm going to play us out. What does that mean to play us out? To play us out? To end the show? All right, go. And that'll do us here for this is Rooks G. I'm going to play this one again because I really like this one. This is the new Rooks G. He's got a couple thousand views on this. ROOXG. Rooks G. Rooks G is also blowing up. He's doing a lot of work. He's playing live. He's on big compilations. This is our homeboy. So what better thing is there than to see one of our good friends blowing up and doing the thing that he does best? He kills it. He is so great with jungle, drum and bass, beats. This is Rooks G with River Glider. Thank you to Rooks G for giving us his great music, letting us play it here. We appreciate him. Please tell him that I sent you. Go to his videos, put those in the description, in the comments afterwards. Shouts out to Ruckus, Hesher, everybody out there. And listen, is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. Here's Rooks G with River Glider. Thank y'all. Appreciate you and love you. Peace. Cheers, all. Peace. Peace. Good night.